MLB suspension policy and fine policy and implementation this year has been just about as bad as the umpiring has been this year, and we're going to talk about it. But before we do, you're going to have to hit that subscribe button because this video is for subscribers only. So Amir Garrett was suspended for 7 games. 7 games for inciting a benches clearing brawl, and there's a lot of problems with this, so we're just going to start picking them off one by one. Let's go down the timeline of events. Amir Garrett strikes out Anthony Rizzo. Okay, great, struck him out. Didn't end the inning, nothing like that, strikes him out, and he yells. He gets fired up, pounds his chest, says something about like, I'm here, I'm back, something like that. From reading the lips on the video, couldn't quite tell. But he's saying something in the direction of the plate. Now, was it directed at Anthony Rizzo? Could have been. Was it directed at his catcher? Could have been. Could it have been split? Maybe. Is it inciting a benches clearing brawl? No. Not in my opinion. Because you can tell from Rizzo's reaction that Rizzo didn't take offense to it. He walked away, he kind of looked out to the mound, turned his head back, and continued to walk towards the dugout. So was any benches clearing brawl incited right there? No. Not that I could tell, because the person that was involved right there, Amir and Anthony, seemed to be fine with how that played out. So then what happens? Well, the Cubs dugout, as they are well known to do, the Cubs talk a lot of crap from the dugout. They're constantly yelling at you, which is fine. By all means do it. That's your prerogative. However, when someone then does it back to you, when someone then yells after being successful against you, you know, it kind of just goes hand in hand. Like if you're going to yell at people on the field and people yell back at you on the field, you kind of got to be okay with it. I mean, I think we can all agree with that, right? If you're going to do something and then expect someone else not to do the same thing that you're doing, it's kind of hypocritical. So anyway, Cubs are yelling at Amir. Amir looks over and starts yelling at the dugout. I don't see any problem with that. Is that inciting? Well, if it is, then you're going to have to find whoever's in the Cubs dugout yelling at Amir and get them for inciting. So, who happened to be yelling? Well, we get a pretty good understanding of who that was because Javi Baez hops over the rail and starts running onto the field. He gets as far as the third baseline before anyone stops him, and Moose steps in and grabs him, and then the bench is clear. So, in my opinion, who incited the benches clearing brawl? It wasn't Amir. If you want to see Amir inciting a benches clearing brawl, check out this clip. That's inciting a benches clearing brawl. I think we all remember that. How many games did he get suspended for that? 8 games. But for this one, for just yelling on the field, you get 7 games? Now, if inciting a benches clearing brawl is going to be charging the Pirates dugout, then wouldn't it make sense that inciting a benches clearing brawl would be jumping over the dugout and running out onto the field? Now, to offer a little bit of behind-the-scenes perspective, when there is a benches clearing brawl, if the players in the dugout leave the dugout and go on the field, they're technically able to be suspended. They're able to be fined and stuff like that for leaving the dugout. There is a rule that says if you leave the dugout, you can be suspended and fined. So I don't understand exactly how leaving the dugout, when you're the first person to leave the dugout, when there's clearly no altercation on the field, you know, there's no, Rizzo and Amir weren't going at it. They weren't walking towards each other. There was no sort of like fight going to happen between them. But then Javi leaps over the dugout, runs on the field, and gets an undisclosed fine, but no suspension. So I just don't see how that's possible. If you want to see another instance of what inciting a benches clearing brawl looks like, you can check out this clip. Alvarado strikes him out, and then Dom's talking to the umpire, so Alvarado waits and kind of walks towards him, and then does this, and then starts yelling at him, throws the glove, clearly getting ready to fight, and then bench is clear. I'm fine with that being inciting a benches clearing brawl. Fine, great. Because Alvarado was walking towards him and yelling directly at him, and then Dom came towards him, and clearly there's going to be something going on there if no one steps in the middle, so the bench is clear. Well, great. Okay, if that's inciting, then how many games does Alvarado get? Well, it's got to be 7, right? Because if Amir's going to get 7, then for inciting, then Alvarado's got to get 7. How many did Alvarado get? 3. And then appealed, and it was reduced to 2. Now, I'm assuming Amir's going to appeal. I don't know if he is or not. I'm assuming it might get knocked down or not, but how is that any different? Alvarado literally threw his glove and went to brawl, to fight. Amir was standing on the mound, not going at anybody, yelling, and then Baez hops over the fence and comes out to get him, so Baez doesn't get suspended, but Amir does? That just doesn't make any sense. So, can you say that Amir was wrong in what he did? I mean, you could potentially make that argument. Like, if you're not someone that likes getting, players getting fired up, okay, that's a fair opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. I personally like when players get fired up. I think it's good for the game. I think it makes everything more exciting. Now, yelling directly at someone, you can feel however you want to feel about that. If you're getting yelled at directly, you're standing on the mound, the dugout's yelling directly at you. If that was going on first, as it's well known that the Cubs do, then I don't see a problem necessarily in yelling back. You want to yell at me, tell me whatever. Then when I strike you out, I'm gonna yell at you and let you know about it. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair back and forth that you would expect to have in intense competition. So, is it wrong for Amir to yell at somebody? I don't know, because I don't know all the things that were going on in that game. But it's a little more complex than it might appear. You might just off the cuff be like, oh, Amir shouldn't do that. But y'all don't know what goes on in the dugout. You don't know the history there. You don't know what was being said all game at Amir, whatever the case is. And to offer a little bit of perspective from a player's standpoint, because some of the arguments that I've heard have been, oh, well, it didn't even end the inning, or, oh, well, whatever the case is, he has bad ERA or this or whatever. Amir struggled out of the gate. No denying that. He's talked about it. He doesn't deny it. But having played with Amir, one of the things that helps him be good, and one of the things that helps me be good too, so I feel like I can speak about this from my personal experience, and I'll get to that in a second, but one of the things that helps Amir be good is that he's fired up and he's in that super competitive mode that he gets in, and that you see it when it boils over. He has to be emotional on the mound to be good. I'm the same way. For many years in Cleveland, I was trying to control my body language, and I was being hammered all the time about you show too much emotion, your body language is this, and you're that, and you got to be stone-faced, and you got to this, that, and the other. And so for a couple of years, I tried to just not show any emotion on the field, and I sucked. It was miserable. I hated it. I didn't enjoy playing. I would strike someone out. I'd walk off the field with no emotion. I hate it. That's not what I enjoy about baseball. And as soon as I felt like, you know what, I'm being a little bit... what's the word? A little bit, kind of my mood is a little bit depressed. Not depressed from I'm sad standpoint, but I'm not as emotional as I could be. As soon as I got back to that, I started doing a lot better. As soon as I started getting fired up in moments, I started pitching better. And there's this odd ground where you get you get off to a couple bad starts, or you get behind the 8 ball a little bit. Then you feel like, oh well, I can't be emotional because I'm not very good. And then it gets worse, and you get even worse. And you're like, oh, well, now I definitely can't be emotional because I'm bad. I have a bad ERA. I'm off to a bad start. And you get in this downward spiral. And sometimes, in order to break it, what you have to do is you have to just be emotional to teach yourself how to be emotional again. And it doesn't come in the best spot, perhaps. And, people might look at you like, now what the hell is this guy doing? He's got a 7.5 ERA, and he's he's yelling about a strikeout in the 3rd inning or something like that. I had to go through that just to feel what it felt like to be emotional again, to be invested in the game. Because showing emotion like that and feeling it ties you in with the game. There's more on the line, you're more in it. And you can compete better because you care about it. And there's a certain tie between caring and showing the emotion. For some guys, I'm one of those guys, Amir's one of those guys. And so having gone through a stretch like this with him before, as a teammate, we're all encouraging him to, dude, just go out there and be AG. Just go out there and be yourself. If that's showing emotion, do it. If that's not showing emotion, fine. Whatever it is that you feel best about, go do that, because we want that guy on the mound. We want you at your best. And to him, that's showing emotion. And so I don't see anything wrong with that. What I see a problem with is the discrepancy between the punishment for Amir and the punishment for Baez, and the punishment of Amir versus the punishment for Alvarado, and the non-punishment for Baez. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So anyway, that's my take on it. Hopefully that suspension gets knocked down. MLB needs to do a better job because you can't have... there's two sides in a benches clearing brawl. You can't have one without the other. Otherwise, it just by definition, you can't. So the person who jumps on the field and charges to actually start the thing off, just a little fine. The person who's just yelling on the mound and showing some emotion to start, that started the whole incident in the first place, 7 games. The guy who throws his glove and goes directly at another opponent on the field, 3 games knocked down to 2. It just doesn't make any sense. The guy who slides into home plate and yells, doesn't touch anyone, and walks away, suspended 2 games for inciting, but his teammate suspended 7 games for inciting, for yelling on the field. That doesn't seem to make any sense. The guy who ran up behind Castellanos and grabbed him by the neck and shoved him and stuff like that, nothing. None of it makes any sense. So you just got to be better, MLB. There just has to be just make it make sense. Just make it make sense. That's all I can say. None of this makes any sense. Should Amir be suspended? No, I don't think so. Should Baez be suspended for running on the field and starting that stuff? If anyone's going to be suspended in that case, it should have been Baez. That's my personal opinion. But just make it make sense.